Mendoza. But you know who is there at the scouting combine in Indianapolis? How many consecutively is this for you? Pete Prisco with us now from CBS Sports, my buddy, on Twitter at Prisco CBS, longtime NFL writer and analyst, CBS Sports HQ, CBSSports.com. How many consecutive combines for you now, Pete?
I think it's 33, 33 or 32.
So did you ever go to the combine when it wasn't in Indianapolis? Was that like Seattle in like the late 80s? Like, were you ever at a combine not in Indy?
No, but I will tell you this. When I first started coming to the combine, the media workroom was in the lobby of the hotel where the players stayed. There was probably 25 reporters, and they'd bring the players down into the lobby, and you'd gather around and interview them in the lobby of the hotel. That's how much this thing has changed. I mean, it's mushroomed into a giant event, and everybody has a space, and it's Radio Row and the whole deal. You know that. It's just crazy.
So set the stage for us, Pete. What's it like today, like right now at the scouting combine in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil?
Well, what they're doing right now is all the defensive linemen and linebackers are doing their interviews, and they're all being paraded around, to all the various networks and stuff. In fact, at CBS right now, they're doing some interviews with some of those defensive linemen right now. And by the way, there's a lot of really good defensive linemen in this class and linebackers as well. So this is a good, solid group. Not great, but a good, solid group. And I think these guys right now, what you try and do is try and get a gauge on what they are like as people, even though, to be honest with you, Nick, and you know this as well as anybody, they're so well prepped and well rehearsed right now, more so than what they used to be back in the day, that it's hard to get a read on some of these guys.
All right, I want to get your thoughts, Pete, as the interview moves along on like what's going to happen with Kyler Murray, what the Vikings are going to do at quarterback. I led the show with that last hour. But since you brought it up, like the defensive linebackers and the linebackers, right? And I know, at this point in the process, on like national shows like this one, we're largely talking about, Mendoza. We're talking about Ty Simpson. We're talking about Jeremiah Love. But there are, to your point, a lot of great defensive linemen, linebackers, a couple of them from Ohio State, right, with Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles. There's David Bailey from Texas Tech. Kind of set the stage for us a little bit here, Pete, on the best defensive players in this draft that we think could go early and why.
Well, let's start with Reese. Reese, to me, is, he said today, because he's always, people say, is he off the ball linebacker, is he an edge? And, of course, he's going to say, I'm an edge because, edge rushers get paid a lot more and they get a lot of sacks. And so he said he was an edge, and I think he is. He's not I don't think he's as twitchy and dynamic as maybe like, Parsons and Abdul Carter even. But he has the ability to rush the passer. He can do a lot of different things. Styles, to me, is the most violent of the two. I think he plays he's a former safety, and he's been blown up to a linebacker, and he can bring a punch, and he's active. He's not as nuanced in terms of playing the position because he's kind of new to it, but he still makes a lot of plays. Bailey, as an edge rusher, has great twitch and great explosiveness. The question with Bailey is he big enough? He's not a big guy. I'm curious to see what he weighs in here. He's not a thick guy. So there's some concern on what do you do with him that can be an every down end. So I think those three are three of the top guys, but there's a lot of guys down the line who could rush the passer. And I'll give you a name for a guy I really like down the line is R. Mason Thomas from Oklahoma. You want twitch, you want explosive ability, that's a guy I think he's going to sneak into the back end of the first round.
So maybe back end of the first round you said for that player, but I want to ask you about a guy, Pete, who I think a lot of us assume is going to go top 10. But, as the draft process has kind of started here, right? So the national championship game ends from then until now. It feels like there's a lot of varied opinions on Miami pass rusher Ruben Bain, right? Where you're watching last season in college football, you meaning the Royal you in the audience, and you're thinking like, this guy's going to go top 5. Maybe he goes top 3. He's awesome. Now there are some people saying, like, does he have the speed required? Is he too big? Is he going to go top 10? Where are you at, Pete, on Miami pass rusher Ruben Bain?
Nick, I'm glad you brought him up because he's a tough evaluation, in large part because he doesn't have the prototypical body size. He's a shorter defensive end. He's kind of squatty. And he doesn't have that quick twitch you like from a defensive end. So, and yet the other side of it is he plays such a violent, nasty, physical game that you can bring him inside and rush him on third down. So I think position is concerned for him because is he big enough to be an every down end? Now, some guys think he could be a power left end, but is he twitchy enough to rush the passer? I think he's a really good football player, but it's hard to find a comparison to him because his body type is so different, and he is such a power player, maybe more so than he is a speed player.
I want to hit you with one more defensive player question. Caleb Downs from Ohio State is going to be such an interesting talking point heading up to the draft because there are people, and we had Connor Rogers from NBC on the show last week. He has Caleb Downs as his number one player in the draft. And I don't think anyone thinks, Pete, that Caleb Downs is not a great football player. I think the problem that some people have with Caleb Downs, and maybe you share this opinion, is that he's a safety. And do you want to draft a safety? I'm a Giants fan at 5th overall. And I'm not sure about the answer to that question. Where do you come down on the Caleb Downs debate? Because again, everyone thinks he's great, but he also plays a position that doesn't really matter as far as the top 5 or 10 is concerned. Your thoughts on Caleb Downs?
Yeah, and I sent out a tweet about a couple weeks ago where I said, let's look at the safeties who won the Super Bowl. Well, Julian Love and Kobe Bryant were both converted corners at some points in their career. Neither one of them, was a prototypical safety. You go back to last year with the Philadelphia Eagles; they won a Super Bowl with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. It was, I think, a 3rd-round pick or 4th-round pick, and Reed Blankenship, who was an undrafted free agent. The moral of the story is the position doesn't matter as much as the guys up front matter, and that's why I think there's some people down on Caleb Downs. He's a good safety. But, if you compare him to Kyle Hamilton and Nicky Manwari, he's not big like those guys. He's not as physical as those guys. But he is a darn good football player, makes a lot of plays. But, again, I go back to what I think about the position and what a lot of guys think about the position. The value, probably doesn't warrant taking him in the top 5 to 10, at least in my book, when I think you can get safeties down the line.
Pete Prisco here with us, CBS Sports, live from the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis on You Better You Bet. Pete, is there anything, any conversation, any negative to be taken from Fernando Mendoza not really participating in the Scouting Combine, or are people just kind of shrugging that off?
They're shrugging it off. And Nick, I think that might be a trend going forward. I think, player empowerment has become a big thing in college football. It's becoming an even bigger thing in the NFL. And I think if, these agents talk to these guys, they say, look, why would you go there and throw when you're going to be the number one overall pick? You can throw in your environment of your own comfort with your own receivers at Indiana. So why do it there? And I think you're going to see more and more of that going forward, which is not a good thing for the combine, by the way. But you understand it from a player standpoint. This is his moment. This is his chance. What if he went here and he threw lollipops all over the place, and all of a sudden now people go back and reevaluate? Well, is his arm good enough? Right now he's the number one pick in the draft. Why not throw when you're in comfort zone at your own place?
What quarterback, Pete, are you most excited to watch this week in Indianapolis, and why?
Well, look, none of these guys are great after him. I think there's a significant drop-off, and which is why next year's draft, we say that every year, by the way, but I think next year's draft has a chance to be truly special from the quarterback position. But I think Ty Simpson's the guy everybody wants to see throw. He was hurt. He had a good start to his season last year at Alabama, got hurt, wasn't the same player. You could clearly see he wasn't throwing with the same velocity. I think he's back healthy again. He's supposed to throw here. If he throws here, I think a lot of people are going to have eyes on him because there's a chance, quarterback needy, quarterback desperate teams, depending on what they do in free agency, are going to look at him and say, hey, look, can he fix my team? Can I get him at the back end of the first round? So I think he's a big week for Ty Simpson.
Last draft question here, and then I want to get your thoughts on some news in the NFL. I actually think in the years you've been coming on this show, you nail this almost every year on and this is not like a who's the first wide receiver going to be. We could do that down the line here. But it feels like, Pete, and there's a lot of really good ones in this class, that there's 3 at the top, right? Tate, Tyson, and Lemon. Out of those 3, who does Pete Prisco like the most and why at the receiver position?
Tate. And I think he's the best of the 3. And look, that's not to downgrade my Sun Devil, Jordan Tyson, but Tyson wasn't on the field all the time. He was injured, and that concerns me a little bit about him. Tyson could go inside and play in the slot. He can play outside. I think Tate's more just strictly an outside guy, but he's a big physical guy. Lemon's a slot guy. And Lemon, if you want Amon-Ra St. Brown, that's what you're going to get with Lemon. If you want a big physical receiver on the outside, you're going to get Carnell Tate, and I think Tyson could do a bunch of different things. It's close. But if I had my preference, I would take Tate.
I want to run by you the take that I gave out to start the show today. Are you ready for it? This is where you say yes, I am ready.
I said yes, I'm ready. Go ahead.
All right. Okay. Sorry, I don't know if we had you down there. All good. What I said was, I believe the Minnesota Vikings should trade for Kyler Murray. Because if the window's open now, then I think he's got higher upside than Rodgers, higher upside than Cousins, higher upside than Carr, if they're going to bring someone in to be the starter or at the very least compete with J.J. McCarthy. Your thoughts on potentially Kyler Murray to the Minnesota Vikings? Hot take or just right?
No, and I think people are sleeping on Kyler Murray a little bit. And so if I'm the Vikings, I have to bring somebody in. I would bring him ahead of those guys as well. Look, the bottom line is, again, Kyler Murray had some good seasons with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, he wasn't great, but he had better seasons than what Malik Willis had. And all of a sudden now Malik Willis is the guy that the Cardinals want, and they want to get rid of Kyler Murray. I don't understand that. So if I'm the Minnesota Vikings, I'm exploring Kyler Murray. What's it going to take? What's the price going to be? They might want to dump that contract, so you might get him on a relatively cheap price, so it would make sense. That's not a hot take. That would make a lot of sense for the Minnesota Vikings.
What is the percent chance, Pete? And obviously things are fluid, things can change, that Kyler Murray is an Arizona Cardinal week 1 next season?
I think it's about 15% chance. The contract is tough, and so they got to manage through that. But I think if they have their druthers, you hear the rumblings that if they have their druthers, they'd get rid of him and bring in Malik Willis, which I don't understand, by the way, because I think, Kyler Murray's a much better player than Malik Willis.
So whether or not we think like Willis is good or not, where do you think is Arizona the answer to that question? If you had to guess, where is Malik Willis? Where does he end up this free agency? What would you say and why?
I would say Arizona. I think you got to look at Miami. Miami's not going to break the bank for him, but there is ties there with the Packer guys, with Hafley and John Eric Sullivan. So I think there's a chance he could go to Miami. But everything you're hearing up here is that it looks like it might be the Cardinals. Now, what's the price? I mean, people are putting out there that he could get $30 to $40 million a year.
He is,
if you
right?
Pay Malik Willis if you pay Malik Willis $30 to $40 million a year, that's franchise malpractice in my book. I think that would be a terrible decision.
So I think that's really interesting, right? And obviously, if the Cardinals sign him, he will obviously get the recommendation from Mike LaFleur, from his brother Matt, who coached him in Green Bay. It's all very interesting. 2 more quick ones for you. Pete, do you think the San Francisco 49ers will get it figured out with future first ballot Hall of Fame left tackle Trent Williams?
Yeah, and talking to people last night, they're talking right now. They want to keep him. I think he wants to stay there. That number was put on at the end of his contract because they knew it was never going to be played for. They would have to do something with him. And so I think cooler heads will prevail. They'll work something out, and he'll be the starting left tackle for the 49ers.
I don't like, Pete, Sean Payton giving up play calling to Davis Webb. Not an indictment on Davis Webb, but this is what Sean Payton does and does well. Where do you stand on Sean Payton giving up the play calling in Denver to Davis Webb?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that either. I think Sean is one of the best play callers that this league has ever seen. Even go back to his days when he was with the Giants. I think he's terrific at it, and I've told him that many a time. I don't understand, and I haven't talked to him since he did give up the play calling, but I don't understand why he would do that. I think that was to keep Davis Webb. There were a lot of teams trying to poach him. He wanted to keep him, so I think that was ultimately why he decided to do that. I'm with you. I don't like it. I think he's too good a play caller. But having said that, maybe if he's not calling plays, he won't go for it on 4th down in bad situations like he did in championship.
Yeah, we don't have time. I liked it at the time. I feel like I may have been wrong on that one. Last one for you, Pete. Any buzz on the 2-star NFC East receivers, A.J. Brown, George Pickens? I think people kind of assume Pickens just going to get franchised. I think the Cowboys might look to trade him. Anything on A.J. Brown or Pickens that you could give us?
No, the Eagles said yesterday, and we talked to Howie Roseman. I think the Eagles ideally would like to try and keep him, but it's people. They're always their phones are always being answered, and so something you never say never. And so if they get a wow offer, I think they would move him. And as far as Pickens, they're going to tag him and try and get a deal done. But here's the problem with tagging George Pickens. You're tagging George Pickens. Players that get tagged don't like it in the first place. Can you imagine what George Pickens is going to be like if he doesn't like his tag and what kind of player he'll be? So I'm concerned about that. I think if the Cowboys do tag George Pickens, which they say they're going to do, they have to find a way to get him tied up to a long-term deal.
Is there any gossip, Pete, that we have not discussed here at the Combine that you think could be valuable for our listeners and viewers? Anything that you're hearing, and I'm not asking you to share any industry secrets, but anything we haven't discussed that you find interesting right now that's being talked about at Lucas Oil in Indianapolis?
Keep an eye on the free agent running backs. I hear ETN's going to have a market out there. I think some of those other, Walker's going to have a market out there. It's not going to be crazy. They're not going to get crazy numbers, but I could see ETN to the Chiefs. I could see Walker maybe involved in the Chiefs. I think there's going to be activity with that running back class.
Yeah, I think Kenneth Walker is going to sign with the Texans, if I had to guess. They'll cut Joe Mixon. I think they've got money to spend at that position. Pete, you're the best. I know it's very busy for you this week. I appreciate you making the time for us. At Prisco CBS on Twitter. You can watch him on CBS Sports HQ on the set with Ryan Wilson and Rand Carthon, Brian McFadden, and others. Thank you very much. Enjoy Indy. I'll catch up with you down the line.
You got it. Take care, Nick.
My friend Pete Prisco joining us here on You Better, You Bet. A lot of really good stuff there. He thinks that the Niners will get it worked out with Trent Williams. He's excited to watch Ty Simpson throw. Doesn't think Caleb Downs is worth an early pick in the draft. Not saying that Caleb Downs is bad, but he had a couple really good reasons to back it up why Caleb Downs is not worth an early pick. The NFL apparently doesn't care that Fernando Mendoza isn't there, which does make a lot of sense.